Hi, everybody. Welcome to Special Education Thursday for June 1st. June is kind of a special month for us with AJE Special Education Thursdays because we're actually going to have 3 this month by way the month goes down. So we're very excited to have a great session today on a topic that's a little bit more technical. And I think it's going to be really interesting to parents and professionals who listen in. As a reminder, we do Special Education Thursday webinars and recordings every other Thursday. And it's our way of taking a small bite-sized piece out of special education and talk about it in a way that a parent, someone who's just learning about the process can understand. My name is Molly Whalen, and I am a longtime parent advocate in Washington, D.C. And as many of you know, I have 2 kids in special education. Both of them have an autism diagnosis. And I am doing the Special Education Thursdays on behalf of Advocates for Justice in Education, which is the official parent training and information center for special education for DC. And you'll be able to, if you're watching the webinar, you'll be able to see our screen and see that I have a terrific guest today, Mauria, who is the Director of Evaluation at Early Stages. And she's going to talk to us today about special education eligibility categories and determination, which is a big mouthful, but I know that we're going to learn a little bit and see if we can navigate this together. So, Mauria, welcome. I'd love to start with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do at Early Stages.
Hi, Molly. Thank you so much for inviting me to present today. I really appreciate it, and I'm very excited to have the opportunity to share what I know about special education and eligibility determinations, and particularly our role here at Early Stages. My background is in special education, particularly early childhood, for over almost 13 years now. I've been in early childhood special ed, and it is certainly a passion of mine. I graduated from Hopkins, I won't say how long ago, with back with a master's in special education with a focus in early childhood special ed as well as autism. And my role here at Early Stages as Director of Evaluation is I oversee the process for developing policy and work around how our teams are conducting the evaluation process, but also really supporting teams individually in helping guide their determinations and how they're making these decisions around supporting families here in the district, particularly our youngest learners.
And, you know, that one of the things that we always like to talk about at Special Education Thursdays is while these topics can be, you know, national in scope and federal scope, we always have like a little bit, this is DC, we're talking DC. And I wanted to stop for a second and have you, for those folks who don't know, explain what Early Stages is for the District of Columbia and for DC families.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad that you made that point, right? So we talk about IDEA oftentimes in a big scope, but then we narrow down specifically to our conversation here talking about Early Stages. And Early Stages is a DC Public Schools Assessment Center for children ages 2.8, so 2 years, 8 months, through 5 years, 10 months. And we help identify any delays that your child may have, and we are in services to address them. And so we can serve any child who goes to a DC public school, is homeschooled, or has not yet entered the school system. So we really encourage parents to even call us and reach out if their child attends a charter school, and we can help them figure out if it's a dependent charter or if it's an independent charter, what the process would be and connect them with the right folks. And certainly if your child's in a DC private school or in a child care center, we also can work with you. And we also want to keep in mind that all of our services are free. We encourage any parent for a child within our age range, regardless of where your kiddo is, to reach out to us, and we would love to connect you, whether it be our teams or with the right point of contact.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is a great piece because while we're going to talk about eligibility and determination, the first step is always a parent or someone who knows the child making that first call. And as I've shared my stories many times, I had to make a call to we didn't have Early Stages when my children were little, but making that call. And one of the things I just feel like we have to say, Mauria, to any parent out there listening, if you have any concern at all or any of that niggling worry, you just make the call. It's so easy to do, and it's the first step. And lots of times you find that things are not as worrisome as you think that they might be. And sometimes if we do find that there's a concern, we can get support as early as possible. And of course, that's what we're going to talk today is if we find that there's some eligibility and those determinations. So let's talk about that, Mauria. What does eligibility mean, and what should parents understand about this process?
And so eligibility, the way we like to think about it, it's a two-prong eligibility process. And so to be eligible for special education and related services, your child, one, has to have a disability, and two, requires special education and related services. And so just to back up a little bit, the process of determining eligibility, whether a child qualifies for special education related services, is known as eligibility. So when you hear that big term of eligibility, it's not just a single meeting, but it's in fact a process that begins, like you mentioned, with a referral that moves on to an evaluation. And then following the evaluation, we then will determine eligibility with the parent as part of the IEP team. So the first piece of two-prong eligibility concept, we like to break that down so it's as pretty straightforward as possible. The first criteria that a child must meet is that does have a disability. So some of this language is a little dry, but we in DC define a child with a disability as a child who satisfies district registration and registry requirements and has been evaluated in accordance with DCMR special education law or policy, and meets one of the 14 disability classifications that we recognize here in DC public schools.
So, that's a mouthful, and you guys know your stuff really well, but can you describe, just in a way, when we say disability categories, how do you all think about it, or how do you share that with a parent as to what those categories mean, or, how they should kind of embrace it if they do find that their child, kind of fits one of those disability categories?
Sure. So in the District of Columbia, we recognize 14 disability categories, and thank you for populating those on the screen. And so we explain to parents that as they go through the evaluation process and we gather information about their child's strengths and perhaps areas of growth, we start to build a profile of understanding this kiddo and where they are in terms of their development and their academic progress, their behavior, et cetera. And we start to line those up with what we call eligibility criteria under each of these categories. And so there are some unique components to each of these disability categories that a child would have to meet. And so by gathering this data and this information, and then also partnering with parents to understand what's going on, we work to figure out if this child meets, again, eligibility criteria under one of the disability categories. So we look at this information and we try to match it as much as we can, and then we also look to see if the child has significant enough delays that would qualify for them as a student who requires special education related services.
So let's talk about these guys. These kiddos are little, they're 3 to 5. Do you ever find that with the children that they don't quite fit into one of these, like very, very specific diagnosis, like an autism? I'm sure specific learning disabilities may be challenging to kind of really decipher at that age. Like, what do you do when we're like, we know there's something there, but we, it maybe doesn't fit a category, or if that happens, I guess? Sure.
So I think that's really a great point to bring up here. And as we think about disability classifications or these categories, that DC recognizes developmental delay as a disability classification. And in my opinion, a developmental delay for this age range is such a gift, as you're describing, where we know that the point isn't we necessarily have to rule out all other disability classifications, but that you can find a child eligible under developmental delay when they have some delays and meet the criteria as a child with a disability, but it's not specific enough for these other disability classifications that have very specific criteria. So we're able to use developmental delay in that disability classification in that capacity to address the needs that a student may have, and then allow them some time to grow and really figure out the exact nature of a child's disability before we make a specific commitment to, in partnership with the parent, obviously, a specific commitment to another disability classification.
And that brings up another question, and while we're not, it's a little bit outside of your work because you're working with the little ones, but, are these disability categories fluid? Like, I mean, certainly with developmental delay, that's one that a youngster would have for, may have for a period of time or may change to other things. But I know some of these things, obviously, blindness, you can pretty much tell definitively, but some of these others, can they change? Can a child, move from one to another, or I hate to say grow out of it, but, be able to get enough intervention services that they don't have that, disability anymore?
Sure. I mean, the goal of special education, and again, this is my personal opinion as an educator, not reflective necessarily of DDPS, but the goal of special education is to provide a student enough services for them to eventually outgrow the need of special ed, for them to reach their developmental and academic milestones. And so it is certainly possible that if a student is found eligible under developmental delay, for example, at 3 years old, that by the time perhaps they reach kindergarten or reach first grade or even the following year that they're exited from services. So that is the long-term goal. It is possible, and it's certainly encouraging as an educator to believe that our students will make sufficient progress to no longer be classified as students with disabilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a key point that I think it's worth both of us stating, both from my personal experience and your professional experience. The earlier that students get their earlier intervention, and we're aware of these, the projection for them to be more successful and more independent and more, achieving more in education is really important. So we want to make sure that people understand, let's get there early. And as you said, the goal is to give enough services to not necessarily need them anymore. And so that's a big key. So again, we just really want to say for any parents listening, make that call. And the earlier that you can get services is always the better. So let's flip over to, kind of what you do on the side of, determination. What does that look like? And, when it is determined and when a child is not determined eligible.
Sure. So as we mentioned, for a kiddo to be eligible for special education, they have to have a disability, and then they also must require services, special education services and related services. And so to get to that point, I really like to talk a little bit about just the evaluation process. For us here at early stages, a referral is made for a kiddo, and as it's passed along to one of our family care coordinators, we partner with parents to understand what their concerns are, and then on the day of the evaluation, a family can come in and we will assemble a team of experts. So that would be our evaluation coordinators or other related service providers to assess in all areas of concern, and then also for us to gather information from our parents. Something that I always try to drive home for all of our team members is that our parents are a child's first teacher. So it is super important that we gather as much information as we possibly can from our parents, whether that's informal through like a parent interview or more structured from like a parent questionnaire related to perhaps behavior or autism concerns, and really to support and encourage our parents and help them feel welcomed and like a leader on our teams around this eligibility determination, gathering information about their students or their child's progress. And so to get to that final stage of eligibility determination, we really have to have parent involvement, and we encourage parent involvement throughout in sharing information with us, so we have the most comprehensive picture possible to understand your child's strengths first and foremost, and any areas where he or she may need some support.
And then how does it look like for, or maybe we should say in the best scenario, what does parent involvement and participation in that eligibility process look like? What would you love for a parent to know to, do the best here?
Absolutely. That's a great question. What I would love for a parent to know from early stages perspective is that you are the driver of the special education process. You know, from the moment that you sign the procedural safeguards and we have the opportunity to review those with you, at any point you can stop our process. At any point you can encourage us to gather more information. We really, really encourage you to be an advocate for your child and to stay connected with us. So whether that be scheduling appointments or following up if a new concern pops up at any point during the evaluation process, that you alert the team here at early stages so we can best support you in exploring that as we move forward to eligibility. And so in terms of a parent participating in the actual eligibility meeting, you'll receive copies of the reports, the evaluation reports prior to the eligibility meeting, and during the eligibility meeting, we'll review those reports. And should you be an English language, should your student be an English language learner, or should you require an interpreter, we can make that available. It's really important that our reports are written in a family-friendly language, and so we are available within the context of even the eligibility meeting to really talk specifics about your student and his or her development and their academic milestones.
Well, and that's really key, and I'm so glad that you guys are practicing that as well, because that's certainly something that we at Advocates for Justice and Education believe in, active parents, and I know from my own personal experience how important that is. And one of the things that I love to tell parents is you can stop and ask questions anytime. And I know that the professionals in the room, when I say this, sometimes are kind of moaning because those meetings can go on and on if there's a lot of questions. But it's so important for parents to understand. And I've said this myself. You know, I'm pretty well educated, but my first IEP meeting was it was like I was listening to someone speak a foreign language. It was just not understandable to me. And I wish I could have gone back and asked a question and stopped. And I realize now I could have, but I didn't do that. So it's always great when we have any time, to be able to say to parents, stop the process. I always like to say you can bring someone with you. You can bring, you know, a neighbor or a friend or a relative, and they can take notes for you so you can really listen, or vice versa. And so it's really important, and I'm so glad that you've emphasized with your team that the parent is that key member and that driving point. And I think also it's a great time to talk about that this can be, especially if you're finding a child eligible, let's go down that path. That can be an overwhelming situation for a parent, and there may be a lot of details and data and reports thrown at them. And so taking time to do that. And do you ever find that, or do you encourage parents, like, you know, a couple days later after they've processed, or a couple weeks later, is there a way to contact your office or your team, or how do they go about like asking questions after they've gone through this process?
Sure, that's a great question. And we always encourage parents to ask questions during the meetings and after we've spoken as well too. So families, when they are going through the early stages process, are connected with a team member who works as a family care coordinator. And so the family care coordinator will walk them through the evaluation process through eligibility. So that is a specific point of contact. They can always reach out to our family care coordinator even following a meeting. If a child is eligible, we would work with a parent to develop an IEP, individualized education program, and that student would then be receiving services in a DCPS school. And they would also be able to connect with their school-based team or with early stages or both of us, any questions or changes or any feedback they'd like to provide. And so our door here at early stages is always open, and it's really nice. I work at the Minnesota Avenue location, and last summer we had a parent who came through several years ago who happened to be in the area and stopped by and just had a few questions, and she and I had a great almost 2-hour conversation about what's been going on and how can I support you as a DCPS representative. And it's really lovely to see that our parents still feel connected, and I would encourage any parent to continue to follow up with us or your school-based team. And even if you've technically outgrown our age range, our door here is always open at early stages to answer any questions that you may have, just even from the special education lens. We strive really hard to be supportive and empower our parents. So please know that we are here to answer your questions. And I personally like to give out my card. So, you know, if someone has any questions, I encourage them to even call me or email me.
Well, and I think that's really great advice to be able to say that this is, because what I find for parents that they need to understand, especially if they've found eligible and they have a child with a disability, that it is a long journey, and being able to stop and go back and ask questions and having that open door policy at early stages is really helpful, because it is, early stages is identifiable with that. So before we move on, I wanted to ask, so I wanted to go with, well, what happens if a child is not found eligible? And then we can end with, okay, they're eligible, and, kind of walk down the IEP. So if a student or child is not found eligible, what does that mean?
So that would mean that they did not meet the two-prong eligibility criteria we talked a little bit about earlier. And that two-prong eligibility being, does your child have a disability, and or do they require special education and related services? But specifically what that means in terms of logistics is that the school system will inform a parent in writing and explain why their child has not been found eligible. So what won't happen is, oh, they're not found eligible, close the book and walk out the door. We as a school system have an obligation to explain that to you in writing, and then also within the context of the eligibility meeting here at early stages, we will talk at great length about your child's developmental and academic milestones that he or she are meeting, and why this process is not, the special education and related services route is not appropriate for your student. We also can connect families to other resources in the city that may be more appropriate, so that is something that will happen. But specifically what I would want a parent to know is that under IDEA, you must also be given information about what you can do if you disagree with the decision, and the procedural safeguards document provided to DCPS parents has specific information about how a parent can move forward with that as well too.
Yeah. And I think the key piece is, it feels very like, hey, there's a line drawn, and some are going to be, needy enough to need services, and some aren't. And one of the things that I'd love to hear from you is, because I've had some parents say, well, they didn't qualify for services because they weren't delayed enough, which is you get that. But what are some options a parent can do if they're still concerned, and not necessarily to change the determination, but to maybe find supports or resources or help with that, if they're not quite delayed enough, but they still need a little bit of support? Where can a parent go to get ideas on how to support a child to help with that?
Sure. So for a kiddo that in early stage comes to the early stage process and is found ineligible, for example, if they're enrolled in a DCPS school, we would encourage the parent to, and early stages will have communicated with the school as well too, to partner with them and understand what the parents' concerns still are, and if there are some areas where the student is scoring in a range where parents believe they need to make more progress, and to figure out if there are any classroom-based or instructional strategies that can be implemented in the classroom that will help make the difference from the parent's perspective in making academic or developmental gains. Mm-hmm. And I would also encourage parents to continue to talk to work with their school-based folks to figure out any suggestions to make those gains in the classroom.
Right. So they can always go to their school and say, I know they're not getting official services, but what else can we do? What can we, what supports can we do? So then let's go the other route. A child is found eligible. We talked a little bit about, sitting down with an IEP, but tell us a little more about what early stages does with that process.
Sure. So once a student is found eligible at early stages, and we are in the process of developing an IEP, we continue to work with a parent to make sure, even in the context of the IEP meeting, that the goals are a reflection of what we've identified as needs in collaboration with a parent, and then also parents can make suggestions around things that they would like included. And we just really encourage a parent to review the IEP extensively with us and provide us feedback on how we can customize it to meet their needs.
Okay. And then that IEP will follow, so it'll be done at DCP or at early stages, and then it'll follow the child to their school, right?
That's correct.
And just to also say, even though I know DCP or early stages is under DCPS, the IEP will follow the child whether they go to a DCPS school or a parent chooses to go to a charter school, correct?
we would absolutely make the IEP available. Should a parent decide to enroll and attend, have their student enroll and attend at an independent charter, to make that the parent has a copy of the IEP to take with them, and then we also make ourselves available at early stages to speak with the new LEA, or local education agency, the independent charter school, to support them in any ways that we can around understanding the child's profile, sending evaluation reports with parent consent, obviously, and just making sure that obviously parent consent on board to speak with the school. But if we are given that consent, then we would certainly share information with the new receiving school.
That's a terrific point. I don't even think I knew that you all did that. So I really would like to reiterate that. That is that early stages can do that kind of transition piece to a school and can participate with the public charter school, of choice, or DCPS on, making sure the IEP is implemented and introduced. Because I think one of the things we have to say to parents is this is a whole new process. And if you do have an IEP when you're going to a school, whether DCPS or charter, different people are going to be implementing it. So if you have a speech therapy, service, you're going to have a speech therapist that's employed by, the school. So it's also, when we talk about the team, it's all the people that are working with that child as well. So I'd love to, we've got a few minutes left, so I'd love to go to the next, and you have terrifically provided some resources. And as we talk about, we like to just give, if you want to know a little bit more or just kind of put your toe into this, tell me about the resources that you gave. And I don't think I know the regulations one, because I'm not a lawyer, so I don't go to those sites that often.
Right. And I really just could not decide, and I said, I'm just going to go with it and add that on there, because I know it's a little dry. It's a District of Columbia Municipal Regulation Special Ed policy. It's a little dry. It's a bit of a challenging read for folks who are coming into this with not a strong special education background, but I really encourage parents to review this with someone that they know who has a background in special education, or maybe a neighbor or a friend, or even us at early stages if they have any questions. This is going to be your first stop for making sure that you are fluent in understanding the district's position on all the different elements of special education policy. And secondly, the second resource I shared here is the Center for Parent Information and Resources. This is a wonderful hub that we point parents to, and that also I personally have pulled information from to share with parents in the past, because it has a wonderful ability of taking some of these lofty concepts and then breaking them down into very tangible, understandable points. And then also I've included the link to early stages, and our contact information is on there. Parents can also make referrals through our website. And most importantly, you can learn about early stages a little bit more. And as we mentioned, feel free to reach out to us at any point, and we're happy to navigate who might be the best point of contact. And also, Molly, I wanted to mention too that our family care coordinators, work with families through the transition process of enrolling into a DCPS school as well too. So if a student is in fact found eligible and they will be attending DCPS school, our family care coordinators are a point of contact for families as they work through the enrollment process. And so we have developed internal procedures for making sure we have support parents and educate them on what they need to enroll and how to gather some of that information. And so we try to make the handoff in terms of going from early stages to a DCPS school as smooth as possible. So parents can always reach out to us to make sure that, do I have the right enrollment and registration information? And is this being sent? We're happy to answer any of those questions as well, too.
Wow, that sounds like I might need to have you back in, Mauria, in the fall for that, because I think we could do a whole session just on how to enroll at the school and what you should do. I can think about how it's specific things that I'm sure your family care coordinators can give, but it's also how do you have that conversation with the teachers and introduce yourself and share the information about your child. So I may tap you again for that, because I think that would be a really helpful piece about, getting to the school and starting that part. And I also wanted to highlight, thanks for putting the Center for Parent Resource and Information, or Parent Information and Resource. That is actually the Parent Center Hub, is the kind of the big umbrella of all the parent training and information centers, of which AJE is the one for DC. So in addition to, I agree, a lot of good articles and resources and a really, really easy search engine. I find that one, you can go there and go dyslexia or, you know, multiple disability and find really good tools that are very parent friendly. It also has all the parent training centers based by state and area. So you can find AJE there, but if you're looking to move to Maryland, you can find the Maryland Parent Center there. So it's a really good resource. Mauria, thank you so much for joining. I know I have been tapping a lot of people for these Special Ed Thursdays, but we really hope that everyone is enjoying it, and then it's great to have this conversation online. If you're joining us late, you can always find our archive at the aje-dc.org website, and we have the calendar of the Special Ed Thursdays that we've had, and if it's passed, there will be a link. We should have this recording up by tomorrow on the website. And I also wanted to give a little promo for our June 15th. Again, Special Ed Thursdays are held every other Thursday, so we'll do our next one in June 3rd or June 15th at 12:30. And it's with some other folks from early stages, but we're going to talk about what is an occupational therapist and what is a physical therapist, because those are some of the related services that a student may get when they have been found eligible for special education. So they're the ones that I think people have the most questions about sometimes. So we're going to go through there. So Mauria, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. And Molly, if I could just add one little tidbit in there, that we at Early Stages are really excited to be able to partner with parents in this exploratory process around eligibility determination here in the early ages and working with our youngest learners. So parents, if you're listening to this and you want to reach out, I'm personally super excited to hear from you about what your concerns are and how we can support your students. And this is really a passion for all of us here at Early Stages. So we're very excited to be partners with you in this process and help you learn a little bit more about your kiddo, and then for us to be able to support you through your journey in DCPS.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And I'm going to officially stop the recording right now. Thanks all.
Great. Thank you.